They proclaimed war on Earth, Part 1, the Declaration. They had ruled the stars for 50,000 years. They were tall, elegant beings with silver skin and eyes that glowed like dying stars. Their empire stretched across 4,000 worlds. They had conquered species beyond counting. Some they enslaved, others they simply erased from existence. They believed themselves to be the greatest civilization the universe had ever produced, and no one had ever proven them wrong. When their long-range probe discovered Earth in the year 2347, they watched the small blue planet with mild curiosity. For 6 months, their sensors studied everything. They saw the cities and the borders. They saw the wars and the politics. They saw humans fighting each other over land and resources and ideas. The observers made their reports and came to a simple conclusion. These creatures were primitive, divided, and weak. They would fall quickly. Grand Arbiter commanded the invasion fleet. He was old even by standards, having lived for 3,000 years. He had conquered dozens of worlds and had never known defeat. As his armada of 200 warships entered the human solar system, he felt nothing but boredom. This would be easy. This would be quick. In a few months, Earth would belong to the Dominion, and its people would serve or die. The fleet stopped near the planet Mars, recorded his message, and broadcast it on every frequency the humans used. His translators had learned their languages. His words would be understood. "People of Earth," his voice echoed across the world, "I am Grand Arbiter of the Dominion. You have 3 rotations of your planet to surrender without condition. Your leaders will present themselves to us. Your weapons will be destroyed. Your people will serve the Dominion in whatever way we decide. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is a notification. If you do not surrender, we will burn your cities until nothing remains. You have been warned." The message ended. Leaned back in his command chair and waited. He expected panic. He expected governments to fall and populations to riot. He expected surrender within hours, not days. On Earth, the world did fall into chaos, but not the kind expected. The United Nations Security Council met within the hour. Leaders from every nation crowded into the chamber in New York. Some appeared in person. Others joined through screens. They shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate surrender. They argued that resistance was pointless against such advanced technology. Others called for defiance, though they had no plan and no hope. The room was filled with fear and anger and confusion. Then General Wei stood up. He was 87 years old, a veteran of 3 wars, and he had the kind of face that had seen too much death to be afraid of it anymore. The room fell silent when he raised his hand. "They watched us for 6 months, Wei said. His voice was calm and steady. They saw our borders and our arguments. They saw us fight each other, and they decided we were weak." He paused and looked around the room. "They made a mistake." A delegate from France spoke up. "What mistake? They have ships that can cross the stars. We have never left our own solar system. They have weapons we cannot even understand. What can we possibly do against them?" Wei nodded slowly. "They studied our present. They did not study our past. They do not know about Stalingrad, where we fought in frozen ruins until the streets were paved with bodies. They do not know about the trenches of the First World War, where men lived in mud and poison gas for years and did not break. They do not know about the resistance fighters who died in shadows so that others might live free. They do not know what we do when someone threatens our children." He turned to face the entire assembly. "They have conquered 4,000 worlds. They have never met a species like us. They think we will surrender because logic says we should. But humans have never been logical about survival. We are the species that runs toward danger to save strangers. We are the species that rebuilds cities in the same places they were destroyed. We are the species that says never again and means it, even when we fail." The room was completely silent now. Every eye was on the old general. "They gave us 3 days to surrender," Wei continued. "I say we give them 3 days to reconsider, and when those 3 days end, we show them what happens when you threaten humanity." The vote was called 1 hour later. Every nation on Earth, for the first time in history, voted the same way. The result was unanimous. Earth chose war. The response was broadcast back to the fleet. It was not delivered by a politician or a general. It was delivered by a 12-year-old girl from Kenya named, chosen because the leaders of Earth wanted to understand exactly what they had threatened. "We received your message," said her young voice, strong and clear. "We have decided not to surrender. We have decided to fight. You say you will burn our cities. We have burned them ourselves before and we rebuilt them. You say you will kill us. Many have tried. We are still here. You say we should be afraid. We are not. We are angry and you should be afraid of us." Grand Arbiter watched the message 3 times. He did not understand. No species had ever refused the dominion. No species had ever chosen certain death over submission. His advisors told him it was a bluff, that the humans would break once the attack began. Was not so sure. There was something in that child's eyes, something he had not seen before in any conquered species. It was not madness. It was not ignorance. It was something else entirely. On Earth, the preparations began immediately. Factories that made cars switched to making weapons overnight. Scientists who had been working on competing projects suddenly found themselves on the same team. Old enemies shook hands and got to work. Farmers discussed how to hide food supplies. Teachers learned to use weapons. Children were evacuated to underground shelters that had been built decades ago and almost forgotten. In those 3 days before the invasion began, something changed in humanity. The old arguments did not matter anymore. The old borders became meaningless. For the first time in history, there were no nations. There was only Earth. And Earth was getting ready to fight. In his command ship, gave the order to attack. His fleet moved toward the blue planet below. He still believed victory was certain. He still believed this would be quick and easy. He was about to learn how wrong he was. They proclaimed War on Earth Part 2, The Awakening. The invasion began at dawn over the Pacific Ocean. 50 landing ships descended through the atmosphere, carrying 100,000 soldiers. They expected token resistance. They expected frightened populations fleeing in terror. They expected to control the major cities within a week. None of that happened. Commander led the first ground assault on the city of Tokyo. His soldiers were the finest in the Dominion, equipped with plasma rifles and personal shields that could stop any projectile. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never failed. The landing ships touched down in the city center at exactly 600 local time, expected to see empty streets and white flags. Instead, he saw barricades built from cars and concrete. He saw civilians standing behind them, holding weapons that ranged from military rifles to kitchen knives. He saw old women and young children standing beside soldiers, all of them with the same expression on their faces. They were not afraid, they were furious. The first wave of soldiers advanced toward the barricades. The humans opened fire. The plasma shields held against the bullets just as expected. The returned fire and the first barricade fell. Bodies lay in the streets. The humans retreated. Smiled, this was how it always went. One show of force and the resistance would crumble. But the humans did not crumble. They fell back to the next barricade and opened fire again. When that fell, they retreated to the next one, and the next, and the next. Every block was a new battle. Every building was a new fortress. They advanced 100 meters in the first hour. It took them 4 hours to advance another 100. By midday had lost 200 soldiers, not to the humans' primitive weapons but to traps, explosives hidden in buildings, poison in water supplies, snipers who fired once and then vanished into the urban maze. The humans were not trying to win a straight battle. They were bleeding the one cut at a time. On the other side of the world, a force landed in the frozen wastes of Siberia. They expected an easy occupation of the small villages scattered across the landscape. Instead, they found nothing. Every village was empty. Every road was destroyed. Every bridge was demolished. The humans had burned their own crops and poisoned their own wells before retreating into the wilderness. Captain commanded the Siberian operation. He stood in the ruins of a farmhouse, staring at the smoking remains of grain stores that could have fed his troops for months. Why, he asked his translator, a scholar who studied human behavior, why would they destroy their own food? They will starve. The scholar was quiet for a long moment. They would rather starve than feed us. They would rather die than help us survive. Did not understand. They had a concept of sacrifice, but it was logical. You sacrificed when it served a purpose. You did not sacrifice just to hurt your enemy. That was wasteful. That was irrational. But humans, he was beginning to learn, did not think like the. In South America, Colonel led a guerrilla force through the jungles of Brazil. She had been a school teacher before the invasion. Now she commanded 300 fighters, most of them civilians who had never held a weapon before they came. They learned fast. Her unit specialized in ambushes. They would wait for patrols to pass, then attack from behind. They never fought fair. They attacked at night in the rain during storms. They targeted officers and communication equipment. They did not try to hold territory. They just kept moving, kept fighting, kept bleeding the enemy. One night, her scouts captured a soldier. He was young, barely more than a child by their standards. Interrogated him through a translation device they had stolen from a dead officer. "Why do you keep fighting?" they asked her. His voice was filled with genuine confusion. "You cannot win. Your technology is primitive. Your numbers are small. Logic says you should surrender." Looked at him for a long moment. "Let me tell you something about humans," she said. "My grandmother survived a war when she was a child. She ate rats to stay alive. She watched her parents die. And when the war ended, she built a house with her own hands and raised 7 children. One of those children was my mother, and my mother raised me to never, ever give up." She leaned closer to the prisoner. "We do not fight because we think we can win. We fight because we cannot do anything else. We fight because giving up is not in our blood. We fight because every time someone has tried to destroy us, we have survived and grown stronger. And we will do it again." The young soldier was silent, could see something in his glowing eyes that looked almost like fear. Back in orbit, Grand Arbiter received the reports from the ground forces. The numbers were impossible. In 1 week, the Dominion had suffered 12,000 casualties. They controlled less than 5% of the planet's surface. The humans were not surrendering. They were not even slowing down. His advisors told him to increase the bombardment, burn more cities, kill more civilians. Eventually, the humans would break. But was beginning to wonder. He had studied the intercepted human communications. He had seen what they were doing. Factories running 24 hours a day. Scientists sharing research across borders that had been enemies a week ago. Civilians training to fight in their backyards. Children learning to make bandages in their schools. This was not a military response. This was something else. Every human on the planet was becoming part of the war effort. There was no civilian population to terrorize. There were only soldiers who had not yet picked up weapons. Thought about the Dominion's history. They had conquered 4,000 worlds by the same method: show overwhelming force, destroy resistance. The conquered species would submit to survive. It was logical. It was efficient. It had always worked. But humanity was not submitting. They were not even considering it. They were fighting with sticks and stones against plasma rifles. They were dying by the thousands and still coming back for more. They were not acting like a conquered species. They were acting like a wounded animal, cornered and desperate, and ready to take as many enemies with them as possible. That night dreamed for the first time in centuries. He dreamed of the small blue planet below, beautiful and fragile. And in his dream, the planet opened its eyes and they were filled with rage. He woke up in the darkness of his command ship and lay still for a long time. He was beginning to feel something he had not felt in 3,000 years. He was beginning to feel afraid. They proclaimed War on Earth Part 3, The Nature of the Beast. 3 months into the war, Grand Arbiter made a decision that had never been made in the history of the Dominion. He sent for a scholar, not a military advisor, not a weapons expert, a scholar who studied alien species and their behaviors. Al arrived on the command ship within a week. He was small with silver skin that had faded to gray with age. He had spent his entire life studying the species the Dominion had conquered. He knew more about alien minds than anyone in the Empire. Met him in the observation deck. Below them, Earth turned slowly in the darkness. Even from orbit, they could see the fires burning on the surface. "Tell me what we are fighting," said. "Tell me why this species will not break." Al had been studying the humans since the invasion began. He had read their history, their literature, their science. He had watched recordings of their battles. He had interviewed captured prisoners, and what he had learned terrified him. "Grand Arbiter," he began, "we made a fundamental error. We looked at humanity and saw a primitive species that had not yet reached the stars. We assumed that meant they were weak. We were wrong." He activated a display showing human evolutionary history. Humans evolved on a harsh world. They were not the fastest animals or the strongest. They survived because they could do something no other predator could do. They could chase their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Other animals run faster, but humans never stop. They walk and jog for hours, for days, tracking their prey until it simply cannot run anymore. Considered this, they are endurance hunters. Yes, and that trait did not disappear when they became civilized. It became part of their psychology. Humans do not fight in bursts like most species. They persist. They endure. They wear down their enemies over time. This is why our rapid conquest strategy has failed. We expected them to break quickly, but they are not built to break quickly. They are built to outlast. Al changed the display to show human history. Wars, plagues, disasters, ice ages and famines and catastrophes that should have destroyed them. "Look at their past," he said. "They have survived everything their planet could throw at them. They survived ice ages that covered half their world. They survived plagues that killed more than half their population. They survived weapons they invented themselves that could destroy cities in an instant. And every time they were knocked down, they got back up stronger than before." He turned to face directly. "Grand Arbiter, this species is adapted to apocalypse. They expect the world to try to kill them. They are ready for it. We are not the first existential threat they have faced. We are simply the latest." Felt a chill run through him. What else? Al pulled up recordings of human soldiers in battle. Not the organized military units, but the civilians. The old men and young children. The teachers and farmers and shopkeepers who had picked up weapons and refused to surrender. "They have a concept we do not have a word for," Al said. "They call it pack bonding. They form emotional attachments to anything, each other, animals, even machines. They will die for strangers they have never met. They will sacrifice themselves for people who are not their family, not even their species." He showed a recording of a human soldier throwing himself on an explosive to save his companions. "We have seen this behavior hundreds of times now. They do not hesitate. They do not calculate the odds. They simply act. A human will die to save another human, even if logic says the sacrifice is pointless." "That is foolish," said. "Yes, and it is also why they are winning, because we cannot predict this behavior. We cannot use hostages against them, because they will die trying to rescue their people rather than submit. We cannot break their morale by killing their leaders, because new leaders rise immediately. We cannot divide them by exploiting old hatreds, because they have set aside those hatreds completely." Al paused. The next part was the hardest. "There is one more thing, Grand Arbiter, the most dangerous trait of all." He showed recordings of captured soldiers. Some had been released. Some had been kept alive but subjected to things that made no military sense. Symbols carved into walls, Recordings of screams played on repeat, bodies arranged in patterns designed to disturb. Humans have a concept called spite, Al said quietly. It means harming your enemy even when it does not benefit you, even when it costs you. Other species surrender when defeat is certain. Humans do not. They will burn everything they have rather than let us take it. They will die to hurt us even when survival is still possible. He met eyes. We asked our prisoners why they keep fighting when they cannot win. Do you know what they said? They said they want to make us pay. They said they want us to remember this war forever. They said that even if we kill every human on Earth, we will never forget what it cost us. That is spite. That is what we are fighting. The observation deck was silent for a long moment. Below them, Earth continued to turn, blue and green and beautiful, and utterly, terrifyingly dangerous. "What do you recommend?" finally asked. Al looked at the planet below. Grand Arbiter, in 50,000 years, the Dominion has never retreated from a conquest, but I believe we must consider it now. We did not invade a primitive world. We kicked a nest of creatures that evolution has spent millions of years perfecting into survivors. They will not stop. They cannot stop. It is not in their nature. He turned back to, "We thought we were predators and they were prey. We were wrong. They are predators too, patient, persistent predators who will chase us until we fall. The only question is how many of us they will kill before this ends." Grand Arbiter stood alone on the observation deck for hours after Al left. He watched the planet below and thought about everything he had learned. For the first time in his 3,000 years of life, he understood that he might lose, not because humanity was stronger, not because they had better weapons, but because they simply would not stop. They would fight until the last human was dead, and they would make the bleed for every inch of ground. He had conquered dozens of worlds. He had never faced anything like this. And somewhere deep in his ancient heart, he began to wonder if the Dominion had finally met a species it could not defeat. They proclaimed War on Earth Part 4, The Reckoning. 8 months after the invasion began, something changed. They controlled 30% of Earth's surface, but they could not hold it. Every occupied city was a war zone. Every patrol was an ambush waiting to happen. Their supply lines were bleeding soldiers and equipment faster than they could replace them. The ground war had become a nightmare with no end in sight. And then the humans did something impossible. They attacked the fleet. Admiral Wei commanded the operation from a bunker deep under the Rocky Mountains. She had been working on this plan for 6 months, ever since her teams had captured the first intact ship. The alien technology was advanced beyond anything humanity had ever seen. It should have taken decades to understand. Human scientists figured it out in months. They did not sleep. They did not rest. They worked in shifts around the clock, driven by a single purpose. And when they finally cracked the secrets of propulsion and weapon systems, they began to build. Not warships. They did not have time for that. Instead, they modified what they had. Mining vessels designed to harvest asteroids were fitted with nuclear warheads. Civilian transport shuttles were armored and armed with reverse-engineered plasma cannons. Cargo drones were to fly suicide missions into enemy ships. It was not elegant. It was not sophisticated. It was desperate and ugly and brutal. It was perfectly human. The attack began at 300 hours. 117 human vessels rose from hidden bases across Earth and the Moon. They were joined by thousands of drones, each one carrying enough explosives to crack a hull. And leading the charge was a virus, created by a 19-year-old programmer in Lagos who had not slept in 4 days. Her name was, she had lost her family in the first week of the invasion. She had been recruited for her skills with computers and had spent every waking moment since then studying systems. The virus she created was simple but devastating. It did not destroy anything. It just confused everything. Navigation systems showed wrong positions. Targeting computers locked onto friendly ships. Communication channels filled with static and garbage data. When the virus hit the fleet, chaos followed. Grand Arbiter was asleep when the attack began. He woke to alarms and shouting. By the time he reached the command center, 3 of his ships were already burning. "What is happening?" he demanded. His officers had no answers. The human fleet was tiny compared to the Armada. Their ships were slow and primitive. They should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, they were tearing through the fleet like wolves among sheep. The targeting systems could not lock onto the human vessels. Their communications were scrambled. Their formation had dissolved into confusion, and the humans were exploiting every weakness. Watched on his display as a human mining ship rammed directly into one of his cruisers. The mining ship was destroyed instantly, but the nuclear warhead it carried detonated inside the cruiser's hull. The explosion split the vessel in half. "They are using their ships as weapons," one of his officers said in disbelief. "They are killing themselves to destroy us." Another explosion lit up the display, and another. Human pilots were flying their vessels into the ships, trading their lives for kills. They were not even trying to survive. They were just trying to take as many enemies with them as possible. Captain flew one of the modified transport shuttles. She was 43 years old and had been a cargo pilot before the war. Now she was leading a squadron of 12 ships toward the largest battleship in the fleet. She knew she was not coming back. They all knew. But when command had asked for volunteers, every pilot in the base had raised their hand. "Stay in formation," she said over the radio. "Target their engine section. If we can disable their propulsion, the ground forces will have a better chance." Her squadron dove toward the battleship. The point defense systems opened fire, but the virus had scrambled their targeting. Most of the shots went wide. 2 of ships were hit and exploded. The rest kept coming. Aimed her shuttle at the battleship's engine array. In her final moments, she thought about her daughter, safe in a bunker somewhere on Earth. She thought about the world her daughter would grow up in. "Make it worth it," she whispered, and then she hit the engines at full power. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface. The battle of high orbit lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the human fleet was almost completely destroyed. Of the 117 ships that had launched, only 23 made it back to the surface. Thousands of pilots and crew were dead. But the fleet was crippled. 40% of their ships were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The flagship was burning. 2 of their 3 carrier vessels were gone. The invasion force had lost orbital superiority. Grand Arbiter stood in his damaged command center and stared at the casualty reports. In 50,000 years, the Dominion had never suffered losses like this. Not from any species, not in any war. And the humans had done it with garbage. With mining ships and cargo drones and civilian shuttles held together with desperate engineering and sheer willpower. He contacted the other Dominion admirals who had survived the battle. Their faces appeared on his screen, and he saw the same expression on all of them: shock, disbelief, fear. "They built a space force in 8 months, said quietly. "They attacked a superior fleet with improvised weapons and suicide tactics. They lost most of their ships and they still nearly destroyed us." He paused, letting the implications sink in. What happens when they have a year to rebuild? What happens when they have a decade? A century? He looked at each of his admirals in turn. "They learned our technology in months. They are already designing new ships based on what they learned. They are not just surviving anymore. They are planning to come after us." One of the admirals spoke up. "Then we must destroy them completely, burn the planet, kill every human, leave nothing behind." Shook his head slowly. "We tried that. We have been trying that for 8 months. For every city we burn, they build 10 new weapons. For every human we kill, 10 more pick up arms. We cannot destroy them faster than they adapt." He looked out the viewport at the distant blue planet. It looked so small, so fragile. "We thought we were hunting prey," said. "We were wrong. We were waking up a predator, and now that predator has tasted blood. On Earth, the survivors of the battle were celebrated as heroes, but there was no time for rest. The factories kept running, the scientists kept working, and in hidden facilities around the world, the first true human warships were beginning to take shape. They had shown humanity that the stars were within reach. Now humanity was going to reach for them. And when they got there, they would not be victims anymore. They proclaimed War on Earth Part 5, What We Truly Are. 14 months after the invasion began, Grand Arbiter made the most difficult decision of his 3,000-year life. He ordered the retreat. No fleet had ever retreated. In 50,000 years of conquest, the Dominion had never failed to take a world they wanted. Empires had fallen before them. Species had been erased from existence. They were the masters of the galaxy, and they did not run. Until now. The order went out to every ship and soldier. Withdraw, fall back. Leave this cursed blue planet and never return. Some commanders refused to believe it. They demanded confirmation. They asked if it was a trick, a test of loyalty. It was not. The Grand Arbiter himself repeated the order. The war was over. They had lost. The retreat took 3 weeks. Human forces harassed them every step of the way. Guerrilla fighters attacked supply convoys. The remaining human ships pursued the withdrawing fleet. Even as they were leaving, the humans kept fighting, kept bleeding them, kept making them pay. On the final day, as the last transport lifted off from Earth's surface, Grand Arbiter recorded a message. He broadcast it on all frequencies, military and civilian. He made sure the humans could hear it. He made sure the entire galaxy could hear it. To all worlds of the Dominion, he began, his voice heavy with exhaustion and something that sounded almost like respect. Hear me now. We declared war on Earth believing we faced a primitive species. We looked at their short lives, their fragile bodies, their divided nations. We saw weakness. We were wrong. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The words came slowly. We did not understand what humans are. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the fastest or the longest lived, but they possess something we have never encountered before. They do not know when to stop. The recording continued, transmitted across light years to every corner of the Dominion. They fought us when they could not win. They died for each other without hesitation. They burned their own cities rather than let us take them. And when we pushed them to the edge of extinction, they did not surrender. They learned our technology, built weapons from garbage, and attacked our fleet with suicide ships flown by volunteers. His voice grew quieter. They have a concept we do not have a word for. They call it spite. It means hurting your enemy even when it costs you everything, even when you gain nothing from it. They would rather die than submit. They would rather suffer than give us satisfaction. He took a breath. In 8 months, they went from primitive rockets to ships that could challenge our fleet. They reverse-engineered our technology faster than any species in our records. They are already building warships, real warships, and they are not building them for defense. The final part of the message was a warning. To all civilizations within range of this transmission, I offer this counsel. Do not go to Earth. Do not threaten the humans. Do not give them a reason to come for you. They call themselves human, and we now know what that word means. It means a species that will chase you across the stars. It means a species that will hate you for 1,000 years over a single wrong. It means a species that will never forget and never forgive. He looked directly into the recording device. The Dominion will not return to this system. I advise all civilizations to observe the same wisdom. Let the humans have their small corner of the galaxy. Pray they are content with it. The message ended. The last ships jumped to faster-than-light speed and disappeared into the darkness between the stars. Earth was free. The celebrations lasted for days. In cities around the world, people danced in the streets. They wept for the dead and cheered for the living. They held each other and promised that they would never forget what they had survived. But even as they celebrated, the work continued. Factories that had built weapons for defense now built weapons for offense. Scientists who had cracked technology now pushed beyond it. The first human faster-than-light drive was tested 6 months after the war ended. It worked better than anyone expected. Humanity was not going to hide on Earth anymore. They were going to the stars, not as victims, not as refugees, as equals. 50 years later, the first true human warship launched from orbital dock above Earth. They called it the UES Defiance. It was beautiful and terrible, a kilometer of steel and fire and human determination. It carried weapons that made the plasma cannons look like toys. Its crew had been born after the invasion, raised on stories of sacrifice and victory. Billions watched the launch. On screens around the world, people gathered to see humanity take its first real step into the galaxy. The mood was not triumphant. It was solemn. They all knew what this moment meant. In a hospital in Tokyo, an old woman watched the launch from her bed. Her name was. She was 93 years old and dying. 50 years ago, she had flown a suicide mission against the fleet. Her ship had been damaged but not destroyed. She had crashed on the moon and survived barely. The scars still covered half her body. A young nurse sat beside her, watching the screen. "They named one of the missile cruisers after you," the nurse said. "The Are You Proud?" was quiet for a long moment. On the screen, the Defiance was moving away from Earth, its engines burning bright against the darkness. "I am not proud that we can be so terrible," she finally said. "But I am glad we are. Someone has to be. The galaxy is not a gentle place. It does not reward kindness or mercy. It rewards strength. It rewards the willingness to do what others will not." She turned to look at the nurse. "We did not choose to be what we are. Evolution made us into predators. History made us into survivors, and they made us into warriors. But now that we are warriors, we must decide what kind of warriors to be." On the screen, the Defiance entered warp speed and vanished in a flash of light. Somewhere out there, other species were watching. Some were afraid. Some were curious. Some were already planning how to deal with this new power in the galaxy. They would learn what they had learned. They would learn that humanity was not a species to threaten. They would learn that the small blue planet in the unremarkable solar system had produced something unique in the universe. A species that endured, a species that adapted, a species that would die for strangers and kill for family, a species that held grudges across generations and never, ever gave up. The stars had many wonders, they had many terrors, but they had never seen anything quite like humanity. And now humanity was coming. In the galaxy above Earth, the Defiance flew toward the unknown. Behind it, the blue planet turned in the endless dark, small and beautiful and fragile. And very, very dangerous.